Hey everybody, welcome back to A Brief on Grief. Today will be video number 1 of a super important topic, something that's really been resonating a lot in my heart lately. Even before I started this book that I'm reading, but I'm reading a book right now that's, without talking a lot about it, that's what these next few videos are going to be about. It's probably going to be on this subject. And it's basically talking about the unique struggles that boys and men have around grief and around expressing emotions in general, and how it makes them predisposed to really struggling, predisposed to depression kind of early on as young boys even. So it's a huge topic. It's super important and to speak about. So here's part 1 of this, of discussing grief in regards to men. So, as you've learned from previous videos, these grief myths that we have, that we've been told. So when we're struggling with painful emotions with grief, we're told to stuff it down and distract ourselves and isolate ourselves so that we can grieve alone and all this stuff. And those myths are already shaming for us, right? We believe that that's the way we need to deal with our pain. And if we can't do that, then we feel shame and we feel like we're failing as people. And really, men versus women, there's no difference in the pain that we feel in grief. Grief is the same and is felt the same in men and women. I don't want to say the same, because we all have our unique journeys with grief and stuff, but the feelings that are involved in grief, like sadness, loneliness, anger, all the mismatch of things that might be involved in there, there's no gender difference on how painful it is between men and women. But there's definitely differences in the patriarchal society that we live in on how girls and boys are socialized around emotions. And because, as you guys can definitely guess, is that boys are socialized to not be emotional, right? Being emotional is being emotional. So having these emotions, talking about them, expressing them, feeling them, is actually equated to being weak. And young girls, so the difference, let me outline the difference a little bit more. Girls, as the female gender, are socialized and encouraged to be connected, compassionate, to be dependent on others, to show emotions and vulnerability, and just basically be connected, to care about people. On the other hand, boys are actually discouraged away from all of that. They're discouraged away from anything that can be portrayed as feminine or weakness. So they're basically encouraged to be strong, to be independent and not rely on people. They're actually encouraged to just have it all together, they don't have any troubles, and to actually disconnect. So because they're taught that being connected, being vulnerable, expressing emotions, and expressing vulnerability, which is what you need for true connection, is actually weakness. And we are teaching our boys as a society, because of how we've been brought up and stuff too, that showing emotions and having difficult emotions, like the ones that are involved in grief, makes them less of a man. And it's actually, boys are encouraged to disconnect as part of becoming a man. So the way opposite from the way that girls are encouraged to connect, and that's what's feminine and female, men are actually discouraged, or boys are actually discouraged from connecting. So they're encouraged to disconnect from themselves. They're encouraged to especially disconnect from their mother, right? How many times have you heard the statement, "Don't be a mama's boy," right? There's so many examples. I'm learning about so much in this book, and how prevalent this is in our society, how heartbreaking it is, really. I'll go into more of that, I'm sure, in other videos. But imagine stuff. So imagine, I'm trying to think of it as a woman, as a girl, in that dealing with grief and dealing with shame and dealing with feeling lonely and all those other feelings that are really difficult to experience as human beings, that's already like difficult to go through, right? And because of the myths that we've been taught, we already feel like we need to like isolate ourselves and not burden with people with our feelings too much, right? Or to just tough it out and be strong. I mean, we're taught that as girls too. We get those messages too, but so I can imagine, I know, like it's held in my body, the pain, right? From being isolated and having to deal with grief on your own. But is not a challenge to my femininity. Imagine how devastating it is to boys and men who suffer this same pain of grief and whatnot in the same way that we do, but they're not allowed to like express it. They're not allowed to say they feel it without it causing significant amounts of shame and without it actually portraying like they're not man enough if they're feeling this way. And they're definitely not man enough if they're speaking about it with somebody, or if they're trying to connect with their mothers or somebody else they're close to help for support with this. It's such a huge topic. I could go on forever about it, and that's why this is just part one of this topic. So yeah, there's so much to chat about, so I'm probably just going to stop there and take it up in the next video. Okay, I hope this has stimulated something in your guys' hearts for the men and the women out there. It's a global issue. Again, that's a huge topic, but it's such a global issue. It's not just an issue of men. It's an issue, the struggles of men, but then also of the women that love them, right? The mothers that try to raise them, the fathers that are there trying to support them. It's a global, huge issue. So until next time, bye everybody. See ya.